Before Fortnite, FIFA, or even friendly Friday night poker, there was stoolball, quintain, and the thunderous chaos of campball. When we think of medieval life, most of us picture war, labor, or plague. But here's what we forget. They also knew how to have fun. Despite no electricity, no sports channels, and no social media, medieval people found wildly inventive ways to play, compete, and entertain themselves, often in ways that might surprise you. Forget the idea that medieval life was all grim and serious, because just like us, they laughed, they danced, they gambled, and they played, fiercely, creatively, and together. So today, we're stepping out of the shadows of cathedrals and castles and into the fields, taverns, and village greens to uncover the forgotten sports and recreation that brought medieval Europe to life. Play wasn't something saved for special days. For most people, especially peasants, games were woven directly into their daily lives. Take stoolball, for example. Sound familiar? That's because it's the ancestor of modern cricket, and even baseball in some ways. Played with a bat, a ball, and a milk stool as the target, it involved batting, fielding, and running, all done in the middle of fields after chores. It was competitive, but communal. And yes, both men and women played. Then there's the quintain, a rotating dummy mounted on a post, often with a shield on one side and a heavy sack or club on the other. Young knights in training would gallop toward it on horseback, try to strike the target. And if they weren't fast enough to duck, the sack would swing around and knock them to the ground. Sounds like a dangerous training session? It was. And yet it became so popular that even non-knights would set up mock quintains at fairs just to test their speed and reflexes. Even stone tossing, stick pulling, and wrestling matches were part of everyday life. Simple tests of strength and skill, played between friends or turned into serious local contests. These weren't leisure luxuries. They were built into the rhythm of rural life, a way to pass time, test courage, and build bonds. In the flickering light of firelit halls and smoky taverns, another kind of game flourished, one that tested the mind, not the muscles. Board games like Nefertafel, a Viking-era strategy game, spread far beyond Scandinavia, especially in Northern Europe. Played on a checkered board with asymmetrical armies, it mimicked real warfare. One side defending a king, the other trying to capture him. Strategy, not luck, ruled the board, and mastering it meant prestige. Meanwhile, dice games were everywhere. With dice carved from bone or antler, peasants and nobles alike gambled under the table or in public squares. There were even laws written to restrict when and where dice could be played, especially for soldiers, who were infamous for betting away their pay. Card games, still in their infancy, began creeping into European culture in the late medieval period. Decks looked nothing like today's and were often handmade, painted, or etched onto wood. Some viewed them as harmless pastimes. Others called them tools of the devil. One clever game, Fox and Geese, had a lone fox trying to escape a gaggle of geese on a cross-shaped board. A metaphor for real-life chases? Maybe. But in a world where brains mattered just as much as brawn, these games were more than just fun. They were reflections of wit, cunning, and risk. Now imagine this: a muddy field, two villages, no rules, one inflated pig bladder. That's campball, the brutal, chaotic ancestor to modern football. Entire communities would square off, trying to move the ball to a goal, which could be a tree, a barn, or a riverbank. No fixed teams, no time limits. Fights broke out, injuries were common, and local lords often had to intervene. But it wasn't just violence for the sake of it. Campball brought people together, especially during feast days and festivals. It was messy, yes, but it was also a release. Not into tackling strangers? No problem. Storytelling events, dancing in the square, and music competitions were constant sources of joy. Minstrels roamed town to town, sharing tales of kings, monsters, and local legends. Communal dancing was both courtly and crude, from elegant circle dances at royal courts to rowdy jigs on cobbled streets. Yet not all entertainment was joyous. Events like bear baiting and cockfighting, though gruesome to modern eyes, were seen as thrilling spectacles. Townsfolk would gather around pits to watch animals fight, cheer, and even place bets. This wasn't fringe entertainment. It was mainstream. These gatherings served a deeper purpose. They gave people identity, connection, and drama in a world with few distractions. Not all games were about amusement. Some doubled as training for real life. Young men practiced mock battles with wooden swords, Hunters taught their sons tracking through games involving animal mimicry, shadow stalking, and marksmanship contests with slings or longbows. Even children played simplified games mimicking adult roles, gathering, guarding, and competing over territory. Hawking or falconry was both elite sport and survival strategy. Training a bird of prey was a long, difficult process, but the rewards were great. Fresh meat, prestige, and a deep connection between human and animal. Even riddles and storytelling battles were forms of mental exercise. Some noble courts held contests where bards competed to tell the best tale, spin the best rhyme, or trick their opponent with wordplay. Games were serious business, and a well-played one could build skills, pride, and reputation. Not all medieval entertainment was lighthearted or family-friendly. In fact, some of the most popular forms of recreation were shockingly brutal, especially by today's standards. Imagine the scene: a crowded pit, dogs barking, nobles and peasants alike cheering as a chained bear swats at a pack of trained hunting dogs. That's bear baiting. And it wasn't some fringe spectacle. It was organized, commercial, and attended by high society. Even royalty funded it. The cruelty? Largely ignored. It was seen as thrilling, a test of strength and courage, both animal and human. Right beside it in popularity was cockfighting. Roosters bred and trained to fight each other, often with blades tied to their legs. Bets were placed, crowds formed, and blood was spilled for entertainment. It wasn't uncommon for a single match to draw an entire town's attention. These events were often held on feast days, drawing large audiences that blurred the lines between celebration and savagery. To us, they seem barbaric, but to medieval folk, they were communal, dramatic, and deeply embedded in the rhythm of life. Even more surprising? These spectacles weren't just about sport. They were layered with symbolism. Power, masculinity, and dominance were on display. And for some, it was the only place they'd ever witnessed that level of intensity up close. When it came to the upper class, one form of recreation ruled them all: the tournament. Now, you might picture jousting, two armored knights charging at each other with lances. And yes, that was part of it. But tournaments were much bigger and far more chaotic. They were sprawling, multi-day festivals that included melee battles, pageants, banquets, and games of skill on horseback. The original tournament was less about show and more about mock warfare. Teams of knights battled in open fields, sometimes with real weapons, chasing each other through towns. Injuries and even deaths were common. Over time, they were regulated and became more performance-oriented, evolving into the stylized jousts we know today. But this wasn't just fun and games. It was political theater. Knights competed not just for prizes, but for favor, prestige, and future alliances. A well-fought tournament could elevate your status or even land you a powerful marriage. And it wasn't all violence. There were also games of dexterity on horseback, like riding full speed while spearing rings from the air or slicing melons mid-gallop. These were demonstrations of control, grace, and elite training. For the nobility, recreation was a mix of physical challenge, social climbing, and public spectacle. And it was magnificent to watch. One of the few sports that was legally required in parts of medieval Europe was archery. That's right. On Sundays after church, men were often obligated by law to practice their shooting skills. This wasn't just about fun, it was national defense. Rulers knew that a population of skilled archers could turn the tide of battle, and England in particular leaned heavily on its famous longbowmen during wars like Agincourt and Crécy. But what started as a military necessity quickly became a cultural pastime. Archery contests were everywhere. Local lords would sponsor tournaments with prizes of food, money, or prestige. Targets were painted on trees or set up on long fields. Trick shots became popular, splitting arrows, hitting apples from heads, thank you, William Tell, or nailing targets from horseback. It wasn't just for men either. In some regions, women participated, especially in local fairs or smaller-scale competitions. Children were also encouraged to learn early, often turning it into playful challenges. Archery blended survival, pride, and skill. It made the individual a weapon, and unlike shin-kicking or campball, it didn't leave you limping home. Just maybe a bit humbled by your neighbor's better aim. Medieval towns didn't need a football season to get loud. They had feast days, dozens of them. And on those days, fun took over. One of the most outrageous events? The Feast of Fools. During this topsy-turvy festival, the lowest ranks of society temporarily swapped places with the highest. A mock bishop, or lord of misrule, was crowned. Priests dressed as animals. Entire processions parodied sacred rituals. It was irreverent, messy, and an explosion of satire. But that's not all. Towns held mystery plays, dramatizing biblical stories with costumes, props, and stages on wheels. The audience would walk from one performance to the next like a live-action movie marathon. In between were stalls for games, tug-of-war, greased pole climbing, egg tossing, and even drunken races. Music and dancing never stopped. From sunrise to sundown, the square was alive with motion, laughter, and rhythm. Why the chaos? Because life was hard. People needed release. And during these festivals, everyone, from beggars to barons, could let go, even just for a moment. While the towns played loud and the knights battled hard, there was another world of play, quieter, subtler, and no less fascinating. Monasteries, though known for silence and discipline, weren't devoid of recreation. Monks played chess, checkers, and puzzles that tested memory, reasoning, and moral thought. These weren't distractions. They were training tools for the mind and spirit. Noble women engaged in story embroidery, competitions of poetry, and musical performance. They created detailed tapestries not just for beauty, but as a kind of visual storytelling. Think of it as the graphic novel of the Middle Ages. In royal courts, riddle contests and logic battles were hosted between scholars. The goal wasn't just to win, but to dazzle, to prove your wit, your education, your place among the wise. In a world without screens or printing presses, oral and symbolic games ruled. The mind was a playground, and for those with time and access, it was just as entertaining as any sword fight. If you think medieval fun was outdated or primitive, think again. Campball became soccer. Hnefatafel paved the way for chess. Archery contests are still Olympic events. Even the wild role-play of feast days lives on in cosplay and carnivals. What's most impressive isn't the brutality or the spectacle, it's the ingenuity. With few resources and limited tools, medieval people crafted vibrant cultures of recreation that satisfied every layer of society. And maybe that's the takeaway. They didn't just survive hard times, they found joy in them. Their games weren't distractions. They were connections, rituals that built community, passed down skill, and let people express themselves in a world that often tried to silence them. So, what surprised you most? Was it the chaos of Campbell, the intellectual finesse of medieval board games, or maybe the wild role-reversing madness of the Feast of Fools? The truth is, fun didn't begin with the internet, and it sure didn't need electricity to thrive. Medieval people found joy in the fields, in the halls, in the streets, with whatever they had wherever they were. These forgotten games remind us that laughter, competition, and celebration have always been part of what makes us human. If this dive into medieval entertainment sparked your curiosity, hit like and subscribe for more hidden history brought to life. And don't forget to tap the notification bell, because next time, we're digging into the secret codes of medieval guilds and how they shape the world we live in today. Thanks for watching, and keep your spirit playful, just like they did 1,000 years ago.